Hey guys, it's Miss Joseph and I'm doing your tutorial today for Friday, August 28th. If you happen to miss our live session, I'm going to touch on some of the important things that you missed. We are talking about the different variables, controls, and constants in an experiment today. So I'm going to go over the differences between them and help you be able to identify them. So first and foremost, we talk about independent and dependent variables. In a hypothesis, there is a specific spot for the independent variable and a specific spot for your dependent variable. The easiest way to pick it out is to know that the independent variable comes first, the dependent variable comes last. All hypotheses should be worded as an if-then statement. What I mean by that is it should be, if I do this, then this will happen, okay? So if your independent variable comes first, it would be if, insert independent variable, then insert dependent variable, okay? So independent variable comes first, followed by your dependent variable. And I've given you an example on your screen. If I go to bed late, then I will sleep later in the morning. So that's saying that the independent variable is first, which means the time that you go to bed, so the later you go to bed. And the dependent variable comes last, which is how late you sleep in the morning. So essentially what you're saying is how late you sleep in the morning depends on what time you go to bed, okay? So that's why it's called the dependent variable, because it depends on what your independent variable is. And your independent variable is what you're going to be changing. So in this situation, you would probably, to do this experiment, go to bed at maybe 8 o'clock. Then the next night, go to bed at 9 o'clock. So you're changing your independent variable to see a reaction or to get results, because your dependent variable will always depend and react to your independent variable. This video goes over it. You guys can watch it in your own time, but it just talks about the independent variable and dependent variable and then what a constant is. So let's compare the two between independent and dependent variables. An independent variable is the variable that you're going to be changing so that you can get different results. So if you are essentially talking about, or if your scientific question is, I wonder if the amount of water I give a plant actually affects its growth, then what you're going to be doing is changing the amount of water you give to plants to see if plants grow better with just a little bit of water or maybe a lot of water. So the variable you're changing is your independent variable, and that would be changing the amount of water the plant gets. Now what's going to happen because you're changing the water? Well, your plant's either going to die and grow shorter, or it's going to thrive and grow taller. So the size of your plant is what depends on how much water it's getting. So your dependent variable is your variable that's going to be changing because of your independent variable. It depends on what you're doing with your independent variable. So the second example I've given here is changing the amount of caffeine you drink before bed. And essentially, is that making you stay up later? So your hypothesis in that situation would be, like, if I increase the amount of caffeine I drink before bed, then the amount of time I can stay awake increases. Okay? So that would be my hypothesis. Your dependent variable is what depends on your independent variable. So in this situation, how late you stay up depends on how much caffeine you drink before bed. So a good experiment for this situation could be maybe drinking a little bit of water first, then maybe a little bit of soda, a coffee, an espresso, whatever, as long as you're changing the amount of caffeine, and then to see how that in turn affects how late you can stay up, okay? So that's the difference between your independent and dependent variables. Controls and constants, they kind of get used interchangeably because they have one thing in common. They have the whole idea of something staying the same, all right? So controls are your normal aspect of the experiment that you're using for comparison, Okay, so you always have to have a control group is what it's called. And this group is what you're not adding anything to or taking anything away from. So a normal experiment where you're trying to test your hypothesis, you're going to be adding different things or taking certain things away to see its effect or its impact. But your control or your control group is the one part of your experiment where you're not doing anything to. You have to have a normal group to compare the changes to. So that's a control. A constant is a part of an experiment that's not changing even when you're changing your independent variable. Okay, so let me give you an example. I know that's kind of wordy, but an example would be if you're trying to test whether or not watering a plant every day would make it grow taller. Controls or a constant in that situation would be using the same type of potting soil. So you can't give one plant Miracle-Gro and the other plant just some regular dirt. You have to keep things the same so that you can tell when you're changing your independent variable if that's what's really causing the change. If you're using different soils, different types of plants, then you're gonna get skewed data, because some plants might grow better without a lot of water. So you have to have constants that keep things the same, like the same type of potting soil, the same type of plant. It's sitting in the same location on the windowsill. You have to keep those constants so that your data is not skewed. And last, there was this Mythbusters video that identified independent and dependent variables with different Mythbusters that they've created. One was with a lawnmower. So if you really enjoy Mythbusters, this is a really good video to watch because it pulls out the independent and dependent variables in every single one of the situations. Now for the assignment for the day, we did Avenger task cards. So there are these task cards, and they are Avengers themed. So you've got your superheroes here, and there are 20 of them. What you are expected to do is read the description here and then answer the question in bold. And you will answer that question in this document right here that was assigned to you in Google Classroom. It's editable, which means you can type on it and edit it and record your answers right there physically on the sheet and submit it electronically. So I'm going to go over one with you and explain how these work. So for the first one, it said, Bruce believes that exposure to the radiation that created the Hulk can be repeated if he discovers the amount of exposure. So to test this, he exposes 3 German Shepherd dogs to a blast of gamma radiation for different amounts of time. The first dog received a dose for 1 minute. The first dog did not change into Hulk dog. The second dog received a dose for 5 minutes. That dog changed into Hulk dog for a total of 10 minutes. The third dog received a dose for 10 whole minutes, and that third dog did not change into Hulk dog. So what is the independent variable in this experiment? Remember that the independent variable is what you're changing to get results. So we're trying to see what we're changing to make something turn into the dog with Hulk features. So what is the main thing you're seeing in this scenario that's changing? I see that they're using a dog and that it received a dose for 1 minute. There was another dog that received a dose as well, but this time it was for 5 minutes. And then there was a third dog that also received a dose, but this time it was for 10 minutes. So the one thing you see changing in this scenario is the minutes, so the time that it's getting the dose, right? So that is your independent variable because that's the variable that's changing. So that's what you're doing. You're reading these scenarios and pulling out the information that it's asking of you, okay? So if you guys have any questions on how to do this or you're still confused about independent or dependent variables, just make sure you come to us and we will help you. Thanks.